Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Greg.
I'm Cameron.
I'm Dan.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time we heard how the Valar created the sun and the moon from a fruit and a flower preserved from the two trees. Today we conclude chapter 11 of Quentus Silmarillion, beginning on page 100 of the second edition. Now Varda purposed that the two vessels should journey in Ilmen and ever be aloft, but not together. Each should pass from Valinor into the east and return, the one issuing from the west, as the other turned from the east. Thus the first of the new days were reckoned after the manner of the trees, from the mingling of the lights when Arien and Tillion passed in their courses, above the middle of the earth. But Tillion was wayward and uncertain in speed, and held not to his appointed path. And he sought to come near to Arien, being drawn by her splendor, though the flame of Anar scorched him, and the island of the moon was darkened. Because of the waywardness of Tillion, therefore, and yet more because of the prayers of Lorien and Este, who said that sleep and rest had been banished from the earth, and the stars were hidden, Varda changed her counsel, and allowed a time wherein the world should still have shadow and half-light. Anar rested therefore a while in Valinor, lying upon the cool bosom of the outer sea. And evening, the time of the descent and resting of the sun, was the hour of greatest light and joy in Aman. But soon the sun was drawn down by the servants of Ulmo, and went then in haste under the earth, and so came unseen to the east, and there mounted the heaven again, lest night be overlong and evil walk under the moon. But by Anar the waters of the outer sea were made hot, and glowed with colored fire. And Valinor had light for a while after the passing of Arien. Yet as she journeyed under the earth and drew towards the east, the glow faded and Valinor was dim. And the Valar mourned then most for the death of Lorelin. At dawn, the shadows of the mountains of defense lay heavy on the blessed realm. Varda commanded the moon to journey in like manner, and passing under earth to arise in the east, but only after the sun had descended from heaven. But Tillion went with uncertain pace, as yet he goes, and was still drawn towards Arien, as he ever shall be, so that often both may be seen above the earth together. Or at times it will chance that he comes so nigh that his shadow cuts off her brightness, and there is darkness amid the day. Therefore, by the coming and going of Anar the Valar, reckoned the days thereafter, until the change of the world. For Tillion tarried seldom in Valinor, but more often would pass swiftly over the western land, over Avathar, or Ahriman, or Valinor, and plunge in the chasm beyond the outer sea, pursuing his way alone amid the grots and caverns at the roots of Arda. There he would often wander long, and late would return. Still, therefore, after the long night, the light of Valinor was greater and fairer than upon Middle-earth, for the sun rested there, and the lights of heaven drew nearer to earth in that region. But neither the sun nor the moon can recall the light that was of old, that came from the trees before they were touched by the poison of Ungoliant. That light lives now in the Silmarils alone. But Morgoth hated the new lights, and was for a while confounded by this unlooked-for stroke of the Valar. Then he assailed Tillion, sending spirits of shadow against him, and there was strife in Ilmen beneath the paths of the stars. But Tillion was victorious, and Arien Morgoth feared with a great fear, but dared not come nigh her, having indeed no longer the power. For as he grew in malice and sent forth from himself the evil that he conceived in lies and creatures of wickedness, his might passed into them and was dispersed, and he himself became ever more bound to the earth, unwilling to issue from his dark strongholds. With shadows he hid himself and his servants from Arien, the glance of whose eyes they could not long endure. And the lands near his dwelling were shrouded in fumes and great clouds. But seeing the assault upon Tillion, the Valar were in doubt, fearing what the malice and cunning of Morgoth might yet contrive against them. Being unwilling to make war upon him in Middle-earth, they remembered nonetheless the ruin of Almaren, and they resolved that the like should not befall Valinor. Therefore, at that time they fortified their land anew, and they raised up the mountain walls of the Pelori to sheer and dreadful heights, east, north, and south. Their outer sides were dark and smooth, without foothold or ledge, and they fell in great precipices, with faces hard as glass, and rose up to towers with crowns of white ice. A sleepless watch was set upon them, and no pass led through them, save only at the Calakiria. But that pass the Valar did not close, because of the Eldar that were faithful. And in the city of Tillion, upon the green hill, Finarfin yet ruled the remnant of the Noldor in the deep cleft of the mountains. For all those of elven race, even the Vanyar and Ingwe their lord, must breathe at times the outer air and the wind that comes over the sea from the lands of their birth. And the Valar would not sunder the Teleri wholly from their kin, but in the Calakiria they set strong towers and many sentinels, and at its issue upon the plains of Valmar a host was encamped, so that neither bird nor beast, nor elf nor man, nor any creature beside that dwelt in Middle-earth could pass that leaguer. And in that time also, which songs call Nurtale Valinoreva, the hiding of Valinor, the enchanted isles were set, and all the seas about them were filled with shadows and bewilderment. And these isles were strung as a net in the shadowy seas from the north to the south, before Tol Eressëa, the lonely isle, is reached by one sailing west. Hardly might any vessel pass between them, for in the dangerous sounds the waves sighed forever upon the dark rocks shrouded in mist. And in the twilight a great weariness came upon mariners, and a loathing of the sea. But all that ever set foot upon the islands were there entrapped, and slept until the change of the world. Thus it was that as Mandos foretold to them in Ahriman, the blessed realm was shut against the Noldor, and of the many messengers that in after days sailed into the west, none came ever to Valinor, save one only, the mightiest mariner of song. So, quick summary of that. Heard a little bit more about the sun and the moon. The path of the sun and the moon are set. They move across the sky east to west and then back again. Tillion, who takes the moon with him, is erratic in his steering as he longs to be closer to Arien, thus explaining the irregularity of the moon. Lorien and Este convince the Valar to change the path so that there is a time of rest. So it is changed such that the sun and the moon each rise in the east, travel across the sky to Valinor in the west, and then are led under Arda by Ulmo back to the east unseen where they rise again. Fearing further assault by Morgoth, the Valar make Valmar more difficult to reach, enchanting the sea to create obstacles for sailors, and raising up the Pelori Mountains to sheer cliffs that cannot be climbed. There's a lot here too. I like this one. I like reading this.
I love the description of why there is a day and a night. So Tillion is wayward and uncertain in speed. So that's the
moon. He's the one that carries the moon, isn't he?
That's the moon. And the moon wants to come close to Arien, which is the sun. So it's like sneaking up on Arien, closing in. He's drawn by her splendor. Though the flame of Vanar scorched him, or Arien scorched him, and the island of the moon was darkened. So it's getting dark and scorched, but I love you.
Yeah.
And then, so Tillion is wayward and changes speed. And so Varda changes their counsel and allows a time when the world should still have shadow and half light. So it's like, all right, we got to separate you two a little bit. I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I was thinking too, last time we talked about the Valar and their particular roles in developing the sun and the moon. And we kind of get to hear about more of them and their role. So as I recall, Lorien is he's kind of like the Vala of sleep and dreams, and so he wants to make sure, he wants to protect that. Like he thinks that's a really important time. And then Varda herself is the one who created the stars. So it kind of suggests that Lorien and Este convince Varda to change this. It's like, they're your stars and we can't even see them anymore because the sun's in the sky all the time and it's so bright.
Yeah.
So she changes her direction for how the sun and the moon work. I do love too this description, like you were saying, of Tillion. He's even with the this new arrangement where they rise in the east and set in the west and go under the earth. Oh, and then Ulmo too is the Lord of the Waters. He's the one that takes them under the earth, like through the waters, back to the other side, unseen.
You can imagine they're like, okay, Ulmo, we have this plan. We need to take these huge light globs under the entire earth. And Ulmo's like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, you came to the right place.
He's like, I know all the secret places, so they won't be seen.
So cool.
Yeah. I like that. Do you like that, Dan? You're not reacting.
I'm thinking about the whole.
He's reading Star Trek.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So another point of this whole thing with Tillion, who's like wayward and he's not very steady, he's always trying to get closer to Arien, is it describes why eclipses happen. Like sometimes he comes so close to her that he blocks the light of the sun.
Yeah.
And I love that's just like part of the lore of the Maiar and the Valar.
Yeah, I like that. As you know, they have this arrangement for the sun to go under the earth and then up again. Whenever that happens, and the glow fades and Valinor is dim, I just found it interesting that like spikes mourning in the hearts of the Valar as they mourn the death of the tree that gave birth to these great beings. Mm-hmm. Which is just, I don't know, it's a really cool little thing to ponder.
Mm-hmm.
Tolkien totally got all this from God, all of these ideas from God. How God arranged it. Plagiarized God for sure.
This does feel more like a classic myth, explaining why years pass and seasons and things like that,
Yeah, except for in mythology, usually there's some kind of brutal like death involved or something really.
Well, there was the death of the trees.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There's a good point.
And also and
there's almost sort of some Eros present as well with the moon chasing the sun. Like it's like this attraction.
Every time the sun passes the moon, like does a wolf whistle and turns around.
So yeah, this is true myth. I love it.
And they start counting time. Finally, it says, by the coming of going of Vanar, the Valar reckon the days thereafter until the change of the world.
We have days now.
Cool. Oh, who do you think had the first birthday? Okay, no, you go, Greg. You have a better question.
well, just no, it's not a question, but just another thing that we passed by really quick was that if you recall, with the trees, the light of the trees, it was like the one would wax and the other one would wane. But there was that time in the middle of the day when they both were illuminated, and there's the mingling of the lights, is what they called it. And so that's why Varda had her original arrangement where they just go back and forth east to west, was to mimic the way that the light worked when there were the trees. But then the Tillion couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it because he's too drawn to Arien.
It's also interesting that Morgoth would, I mean, he hates the new lights, and that's like, you expect that, but you also kind of expect him to sort of predict that was going to come and have maybe a bit of a plan for that. And yet it was an unlooked for stroke of the Valar. And so we're constantly reminded that although he's this incredibly powerful evil being, he doesn't have complete foresight, and has to sort of sulk and skulk in the shadows after these lights have been remade because he couldn't even foresee it happening.
Isn't that true of the orcs too? Like they hate the light, and I think that was like in the Lord of the Rings, that was part of it. Like the Uruk-hai were this new breed that didn't mind being in the light or whatever. But
yeah, that's right.
That was part of like their strength, was they could just roam the earth at all times. Dan, what you were saying about the morning of the trees.
Yeah.
This point too is made that it never really matched the light of the trees or the splendor of the light of the trees. It was never quite that good, but the one place where that was still true was the Silmarils. Like the Silmarils did capture perfectly the light of the trees.
And again, it has to be like a quality versus just like sheer, like overwhelming power, because I mean, this is the light of that Arien can carry is like enough to illuminate a world.
Right.
And yet with the Silmarils and the trees, the trees, I suppose they did illuminate the world, but the Silmarils don't.
Do you remember when back in the day before lumens was the common measurement of brightness, it was candle power? How many candle power do you think Arien and the sun have? 1 billion?
It must be a lot.
Well, actually, they still measure light output by candles, so it's a standard. So I think 1 candle is 1 lux, and then so you have like cameras sensitivity that can see into certain low lux, and it's 1 lux is 1 candle.
What if it's a big wick in the candle?
Yeah, and how many does it need before it becomes luxurious?
I'll see you guys later.
That's for all our haters out there.
Okay, wait, we have one more thing we got to talk about, at least one more thing, which is the whole second part of this, which is the hiding of Valinor. There's this whole process where the Valar raise up the walls of the Pelori, and it's kind of like the girdle of Melian, where they put all these enchantments on the sea, and there's some new islands there that prevent anyone from coming near Valinor at all. Any thoughts on that?
Probably. So can you give us a quick summary of the step-by-step of the hiding of the Valinor?
Yeah, I just did that. That's exactly what I just did.
So, okay.
I'm trying to find it.
No. So it's page 102 that we're looking at. It mentions that because Morgoth assaulted Tillion, they were like even more fearful. The Valar were more fearful that Morgoth might do something. So it says they raised up
They
the walls of the
They
Pelori
fortified the
Mountains.
land anew. That's
Yep.
the summary by raising up
Yep.
the walls of the Pelori.
So I think, think of it this way. Like, remember back in not that long ago, Ungoliant was dwelling in Aman. They didn't even know it. And she just came with Morgoth and killed the trees. And so they're kind of like, okay, let's make these walls higher and make them sheer cliffs so nothing can get through. And the one exception is the gap of light, the Kalakiria.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like a couple of the things they did. They set up these enchanted islands, kind of by Tolkien.
Am I understanding that correctly? The cleft, there's actual elves present there.
Where?
And in the cleft.
What
so they're
not,
yes. And that's why they're not. That's why they didn't close it.
Right, right. There's still, that's where Finarfin went to with the Noldor that returned. They still live there in the middle. And also they didn't, if they totally shut the walls, the Teleri would be on the outside. And they didn't want that either. So, then they set up these enchanted islands, enchanted isles. It says we're strung as a net in the shadowy seas from north to south. But it sounds like it's that same kind of enchantment where it's not like they just hit a glass wall or they run to the edge of the world like in the Truman Show or something. It's like they get confused and they get lost and they
like the Bermuda Triangle.
There's they loathe the
weird
sea.
Happening
yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's a good way to describe it. And then, and okay, I guess this is kind of what we can end on, but there's a little foreshadowing here. Let's see. And of the many messengers that in after days sailed into the west, none came ever to Valinor, save one only, the mightiest mariner of song. We're going to hear about him later.
Is that Círdan?
Nope. Someone else. That's a good story. That's a good story. I'm looking forward to.
Is it Count Dooku? Cliffhanger.
Oh, no. Yeah. I love these little things that, where he kind of hints at things that are coming. One thing, okay, I have a question for you. What is, for both of you, twice in this reading, it mentions the change of the world. It's like capitalized. So on 101, it says, therefore, by the coming and going of Anar the Valar, reckoned the days thereafter until the change of the world.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it says, all that ever stepped upon the enchanted isles were there entrapped and slept until the change of the world.
So, according to the Encyclopedia of Arda, it's a prophesied great cataclysm that will
Ragnarok.
That will utterly change the form of the world. References to the change of the world are somewhat oblique. So, there we go.
You think that's what
the meaning of the term is? Let me read this quickly, and then. So the meaning of the term is not completely sure, but it appears to refer to the foretold remaking of Arda after the return of Melkor in the last battle. Specifically, we're told the Valar reckoned time by the passing of the sun until the change of the world, and that those trapped by the enchanted isles would sleep until the change came. Sorry, what were you going to say?
It's Ragnarok. Or do you think that's kind of the inspiration of this for Tolkien?
I don't know, actually. Certainly not Taika Waititi's
not that one.
rendition. So an alternative reading is that the change of the world relates to the events surrounding the downfall of Numenor, of the Second Age, in which Aman was taken out of the world and made unreachable for mortals. But that's probably not likely, according to the Encyclopedia of Arda.
I thought you were just adding that comment.
No, according to. I'm just reading you what it says.
Doesn't the world change it one more time, though, cataclysmically? Isn't there like a huge change before the events of Lord of the Rings?
Well, I think
I think it's two.
that's what Dan was just talking
Yeah.
about, the Numenor
But why-
stuff.
Yeah, but then you said it's unlikely.
No.
Change of the World sounds like kind of a final like thing.
Oh, I see.
So the alternative reading of what Change of the World means it could be the events surrounding the downfall of the Numenor. That interpretation is unlikely, but needless to say, like it's pretty oblique. We don't fully know what it means, but likely it means the foretold remaking of Arda after the return of Melkor and the last battle.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, this is the thing about reading these books is that there's so much lore and hidden history that we'll never know about, which is kind of cool. It doesn't make it less real or frustrating. It's kind of like our own history. There's many mysteries that we'll probably won't be able to figure out. We can just speculate on. So it doesn't really take anything away from me. I quite like the intrigue.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually have right here. I was just gifted this New Testament that is issued by the U.S. Army. It's from 1943, and it's kind of cool. It's just the Gospels and Acts of the Apostles, but there's a little I love this kind of stuff. Just there's so much mystery in this this dedication. It says presented to Francis Coleman is written in from your friend Chaplain Thomas A. Murphy. And who knows like what these two men's lives were like.
Yeah, what they got up to. And
hey, Chaplain Thomas A. Murphy, if you're listening, check us out in the Discord, I guess.
Yeah.
Or pray for us if you're
pray for us.
And it's one of the well, Dan, as to your point, it's like one of those things where in Tolkien's history, there's so many gaps. We just don't know, right? He didn't write about it, but that's true of ours too. And that's not a bad thing that we don't know. It would be nice to know clearly and definitively all things that ever happened, but the mystery is intriguing in its own way.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, any final thoughts?
I'm excited for the next chapter because Dan is going to introduce us to some men.
Nice.
Oh, that's coming up. Great. All right. Well, if you like what you hear, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. Silmarils.
I don't get it. Oh, go ahead.
There's 3 of them. So 3 is the maximum.
Oh, okay.
So watch the podcast on YouTube, join our conversation on Twitter, and also our brand new Discord channel. We've got about 5 members right now. That might change by the time. But shout out to our bud Pear, who's been active there, and also Mrs. B, who's been active in there a little bit. Cool place to just have some discussions. I recently made a correction to something. One of the maps that Dan presented was wrong.
Good.
Was it definitely wrong?
It was wrong, yeah. So just clarified that.
Nice.
So anyway, join us on Discord. That's the kind of stuff that happens there. We can talk about things that we said that were wrong, things that we said that we could have said better. Sometimes we flesh out some stuff. So come join us on Discord. Links are in the description, and send any comments or questions you have to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. Join us next week as we read and react to the greatest story you've never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.